This is Sam Curry. It's my pleasure to introduce him. He's a very talented web hacker. He really enjoys hacking web applications, bug bounties. I've known Sam for a few years now, and everything that he does, and I read his write-ups, just constantly impress me. Sam is the founder of Palisade, a boutique crypto hacking company. So if you want to call him a crypto bro, go ahead. All right, with that said, everyone please give it up for Sam Curry.
Well, hello. Can everybody hear me okay? Just to make sure. Yeah. Good? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so this write-up is kind of, it's kind of a collage of like a lot of different vulnerabilities we found over like 3 years. To kind of give a bit of background like about myself, I've been doing like full-time bug bounty for around like 5 years, or I did. And then we started a security consulting company, I think exactly like a year ago. And the focus for us was like, you know, a lot of our buddies were all part of like the kind of like crypto puzzle solving communities where, you know, like someone released like a cryptic clue, like Societa 3301 style. And we were like trying to solve these things. So we were like meeting all these projects and all these things like that. But we saw kind of like more and more there were like these web apps that were running like kind of crypto things. And let me see real quick. I forget which slide is which. So this is kind of my introduction to cryptocurrency, right? I think about like 2014 or 2015, I was playing RuneScape, CSGO, and like in high school, right? And I kind of realized that like selling gold or like buying items isn't really possible without like something else. So I figured out about like Bitcoin and stuff, and we were trading currency, trying to, you know, buy and sell, probably like 100, 200 bucks. But you know, around that time I started doing like web application security. This was around like 2015, 2016. And at the time there's like a lot of these like crypto exchanges, right? So, so here we go. So this is me, right? This is like 2015, kind of my introduction to like cryptocurrency stuff. And at the time, right, like there's not really an infrastructure set up too well, so you have to like go on these forums and like pull your ID up, and then the exchange rate, and take a photo of yourself. And you know, after kind of exploring cryptocurrency for a little bit with kind of like a security perspective and maybe like 2015, 2016 or whatever, you kind of realize there's some pain points, right? You've got like the actual like crypto part of cryptocurrency, which is like, you know, decentralized, like the validators and nodes and stuff. But like realistically, like if you want to use cryptocurrency, you have to put it on a centralized exchange. And then once it's on the exchange, it's like not really decentralized, right? So I kind of got like really curious about how exactly like the security works for these things, right? And I started exploring kind of more and more alongside the time I was doing like kind of introduced to bug bounty. It really wasn't a big thing right now. I think HackerOne was maybe like 2 or 3 years old, but I was like kind of curious about like doing security for this stuff. But one of the websites we used to use, or I guess we'll go back. I think I broke it a little bit. Let me see. There we go. So I guess before that, yeah, to kind of touch on the idea of like what this talks about and kind of more about it, like, and you know, the last couple of years, there's all the news about like, oh, you know, there was a smart contract hack for like $300 million. There's a lot of like bridge exploits, but like realistically, like you're still working with websites, right? You can't really get past that. Like if you have a website like BitConnects or whatever, you're going to be interfacing it through a website, right? And to kind of talk about a specific example of this is there's recently a hack called Badger DAO, right? And they were hacked for $130 million. And the hack wasn't, you know, like a smart contract, Ethereum, you know, hack where they're like pulling into the source code. What the hackers did was they went to Cloudflare. And what they did was they saw that Badger DAO as a company was about to be like a crypto company. So what they did is they just registered the email addresses associated with Badger DAO into Cloudflare, and they generated API keys before Badger DAO did. And the thing with Cloudflare is you didn't have to confirm your email to generate the API keys. So, you know, you've got this fresh company, Badger DAO. They're put all this stuff together. They're about to build like this big crypto infrastructure with, you know, smart contract and all this stuff. But beforehand, they put their email address, or, you know, attackers realized they were going to register to Cloudflare. They put their email address in, and they pre-registered to Cloudflare. And basically what that led to is when Badger DAO did get started and they were running a company, the hackers legitimately just used the API key that they generated to inject JavaScript onto the Badger DAO web interface and stole $130 million. Yeah, so it's really interesting because, you know, it is crypto's open secret, right? Because the way in which everyone wants to like kind of frame crypto hacks and all this stuff is like these really technical, you know, smart contract vulnerabilities, but again, it's built on top of web, right? And that's kind of the whole premise for this talk. So to kind of get right into the issues, and by the way, yeah, this talk is like a lot of different vulnerabilities we found over the last 3 years, but kind of the first issue, right? This was 2016, I think. I used Paxful to like buy and sell cryptocurrency, right? And you know, just to get started with like, I'm 16 years old, like how do you hack websites? Very simple, great idea. uXSS payloads everywhere. You know, and like Paxful is basically this big like peer-to-peer cryptocurrency exchange where if you want to buy Bitcoin, you say, I'd like to buy Bitcoin with my Amazon gift card, and then the seller says, I'd like to sell Amazon or Bitcoin through Paxful. And the Bitcoin gets deposited into Paxful into like a hot wallet, and then you communicate with the seller of the website, and then once you agree, the amount is, you know, sold to you and it's let out of the hot wallet, right? But the funny thing is, like, you know, after explaining like why XSS payloads everywhere, you get some XSS fires, right? And it's really interesting because you know, Paxful is really smart, right? They put their administrative panel behind like a VPN, right? But you know, XSS doesn't care. It's gonna pop in the VPN portal, right? So after spraying, you know, the blind XSS payloads, and we were able to basically, and I do apologize, the talk was like labeled as not super technical, but I'm gonna be talking about like a couple of specific web vulnerabilities. You'll probably have heard of them, but overall, like it's, you know, kind of, it's mostly introductory-ish. But if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to let me know. But yeah, after spraying the, you know, blind XSS payloads everywhere, we have one XSS fire and two XSS fires. But with this XSS fire, you can see there's this Paxful core. And with this one, there isn't, right? So for the second one, an administrator viewed my blind XSS payload, but they were authenticated as like a super administrator, right? But what's frustrating was, during testing, I wasn't able to reproduce with the super administrator. So what I did was, I dig the JavaScript out of the administrator panel via, you know, an XML HTTP request to like kind of exfil it. And then I realized that there's like a privilege escalation vulnerability where the support level user can actually access the core administrative functionality of Paxful. And what is the core administrative functionality of Paxful? It is this. So you can't really see this, but this is the core wallet controller on the administrative panel for Paxful, right? And at the time, there's about 500 Bitcoin in the hot wallet. And they have this great form, and you can't really read it right here, but it says, use if only when you need to test whether Bitcoin API server works. So on success, this button will turn your transaction ID. And it's got, you know, you don't really see it here, but that 0.0001 Bitcoin or 0.001, it was in a, you know, masked out text field, so you couldn't edit it, right? But you know, you can just manually modify the HTTP request. So this form was hooked up to the core hot wallet with 500 Bitcoin, and it was vulnerable to CSRF, right? So if you created an HTML form, sent it to the admin, you could execute this on behalf of the administrator and withdraw 500 Bitcoin, right? So with all the, you know, marketing and all the stuff, like crypto at its core with a real user experience is not decentralized, right? You know, there's also like vulnerabilities where you can just find the source IP of the server and directly connect to it and then use those administrative cookies to have free reign on the website, right? And it's just not the greatest setup for, you know, irreversible transactions. But yeah, they paid a nice bounty, and this was in 2017. This was before like a lot of the crazy bounties, so like this bounty was actually like really good for, you know, what it was, right? So you think, you know, 2017, you have these like crazy web vulnerabilities, you have this, you know, web's absurd and like nothing's fixed, and then like, you know, you go through the Enlightenment, which is between 2017 and 2022, right? And you'd expect, you know, with all the like artificial intelligence and all that stuff, this problem would be solved, right? But 2022, just recently, right? There's another blind XSS payload that fired on Wire. Exact same thing, very simple, right? Pull out a blind XSS payload in this thing called Wire, and what Wire is, it's basically the same thing, except with Wire, it's just buying it directly from the server, and it's not peer-to-peer. So, you know, you throw a blind XSS payload in your KYC application, basically just providing your identity, and you have access to like the full, you know, administrative panel. And I like this lyric from a song by Mr. Whitey Cracker, who's got his like hacker rap, right? And it's I guess some things never change, getting all these fools with the same games. Most of the methods in my back catalog barely need any modification to do the job, which is like, It's been 4 years, and this is still like an issue, right? And they paid like 10 grand, but it's 2022 now. So like, who owns your crypto, right? A lot of people, does anybody hear of like MetaMask or like kind of crypto stuff? Cool. Yeah, so a lot of people prefer like self-custody because it's like, I actually own my crypto keys, super fair. But realistically, like, not even the exchanges now own your crypto. What happens, right, is like you've got like Binance where you want to buy like cryptocurrency. But what Binance does is they don't actually hold your crypto anymore. Binance uses a company called Prime Trust. And what Prime Trust is basically an API built for a company called Fireblocks. And what is Fireblocks? Fireblocks does billions of dollars a day in transactions for all the different exchanges, right? So realistically, like, if you want to be like our company Palisade, we're like a boutique crypto hacking company. But realistically, if you want to hack Binance, like, it's a normal web application security assessment because they're just leveraging an API, right? So there isn't any fancy, like, crazy crypto hacking stuff. You could literally just do a web app audit and compromise, one of these companies' API keys, which is a thing that happens, right? So we'll get to the next vulnerability, right? There's a company called Vulcan Forged. Yeah. So Vulcan Forged, they are a game, a DeFi game, right? And they label themselves as like a semi-custodial game. But we found their reported a SQL injection vulnerability, which let us, access the private keys of the users. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a post request where you update your user profile. It's a pretty simple-ish vulnerability, but you're able to dump the, ASP.NET database, which included private keys and API keys for their users, right? And one thing with crypto is like a lot of the companies are so new and they have so much money, but they don't really have a lot of security experience, right? So when we report this vulnerability to them, they really didn't care, right? They said, okay, we'll pay you a bounty, we'll fix it, but don't do it again. Like, we have a security program, but we don't really like, interacting with you, right? It was like, to talk to this guy, and keep in mind, this company had like $150 million market cap or whatever. The guy was like, messaged me on Telegram to report the vulnerability, and like, it's a very weird conversation, right? So we're like, okay, we report vulnerability, and we're just not gonna hack this company again, we're not gonna participate in their security program. But 6 months later, they're hacked for $140 million. How'd they get hacked? Someone exploited our servers. They got the Venli credentials and used it to extract the private keys of the MyForge users. It's a Web2 vulnerability, right? Like, I don't know, it's hard to communicate, but like a lot of the people we interact with through Palisade, like, I'm not trying to like, dunk on these people, like these people don't know security or whatever, but there's like a lack of understanding of like the fundamental like security problems that these crypto companies face, right? So what someone did is basically they did the same thing. They found SQL injection, they used it to dump the Venli, which is something like Fireblocks. It's a custodial, they hold your crypto, right? And they're able to use the credentials to decrypt the private keys of the users and exfiltrate $140 million. And it's just, it's kind of, I don't like being the person who's like, I told you so. Like, our report really mattered. You should have maybe paid us a bounty, nice bounty, but, and then we could have helped them, right, or whatever like that. But it's just, it's frustrating seeing like the same thing happen a couple times. But this is also around the time where there's like the introduction of the Ethereum ecosystem, right? You have our founder, our Lord and Savior, Vitalik, and he's running, he produces Ethereum, which Ethereum has like smart contracts, right? And what do smart contracts do? I mean, at its foundation, if you write a secure smart contract, like, realistically, you're probably not gonna get popped, right? Like, if you have, like, a smart contract that's running like a decentralized, has like good code that's solid, and does like permission checks, you're probably okay. But the issue that's introduced is, where do these smart contracts run? You have the introduction of Web3.JavaScript, or Web3.js, right? And what Web3.js is like, it's an interface for your browser to talk to these RPC things that basically let you, send money from like MetaMask or your browser extension. So realistically, you're still talking to it through a website, right? And, to talk more about that, it's like everything is on chain. We can verify who's who, right? But not really, right? So there's a thing that happened, the famous artist Banksy, right? Nobody really knows, or people maybe do know who he is or whatever, but there's not really too many points of authority for Banksy, right? Like, if you want to get in contact with Banksy, you have his website, his Instagram, right? And we reported we were looking at like a Discord server. There's like a bunch of people who were looking at the Banksy website, and someone found the vulnerability, and people were kind of talking about it. So we went ahead and sent an email like, hey, there's this vulnerability on your website where you're able to upload like arbitrary files. Like, it's kind of bad, but it's Banksy's website. Like, what can you do? Well, now with the introduction of cryptocurrency, like what someone did before they fixed it was they sold an NFT on Banksy's website, right? And someone buys it for 244,000 pounds, right? So there's like, where is the you have like addresses with signatures and like you can cryptographically see who's who, but like people can just do this stuff, and it's like, oh, it's not really a good authority. It's not directly a crypto problem, but it's like, how do you know who's who realistically, and what damage does that cause, right? And kind of another thing with like these cryptocurrency apps is, where are they deployed, right? So you've built like your smart contract, you want to deploy it, and decentralize it, and have people access it, but realistically you're going to deploy it on Vercel, Netlify, through Next.js, or these last two are actual ones that are kind of better, where you deploy it on-chain on this thing called IPFS, where that way it's like more, like if you want to actually access it via the Ethereum chain, like let's say you download a whole copy of the chain, you can actually plug in the IPFS URL, and then that way you're kind of getting closer to accessing the decentralized file. But realistically, with the top three, like if you go to OpenSea, right? OpenSea runs on Next.js. And what Next.js has is a bunch of serverless features, right? So there's like all these attack vectors to actually compromising like the core part of what you're interfacing with, right? And so for Vercel, pretty simple bug, but Vercel is basically the AWS of like easy to deploy GitHub dynamic JavaScript apps, right? You click a button and it connects to your GitHub and then it deploys the app, right? But there's a really simple vulnerability where you could basically, the connector for adding a GitHub account, which lets you do like sign in with GitHub, for instance, you can just send someone a URL and then it's vulnerable to CSRF and then it's bound to their account and now you can log in as that person. And now, the facade is like gone. You're now able to change code on these like big, massive, decentralized finance apps that people interface with. And it's a hard problem to solve. So this is one of the more like text-heavy slides. It's kind of like crypto attack vectors for web vulnerabilities, right? So to give more of like my background, like I have a very heavy background with like web application security, right? And I saw like all the write-ups by people like Sam CZ Sun who've done like very technical work, which is basically like hard math problems, right? For smart contract vulnerabilities. I saw that and I'm like, no, I can't do that. Like, that's too hard for me. So I was like, okay, I know web security, so how do I approach crypto vulnerabilities with a web security background? And kind of like a little small checklist is like, if the app is self-custody, where you own your own private keys, it's like, where is it hosted? Can you like create content or overwrite content somehow? What libraries does it use? And is it one of those weird dynamic JavaScript ones, right? And those ones are very interesting. We'll talk more about that later, but is there anything that's imported on chain, right? So if you're using a website where you can like buy and sell crypto stuff, can you control like an NFT, And if you can publish an NFT to the crypto website, can you throw in like payloads to change the content? If the app has custody, like the website itself like owns your cryptocurrency, there's kind of some things you can do. It's like, does the app use Fireblocks or any other like monetary provider? And if so, are they using it correctly, right? Because if you're going to use Fireblocks, like the big custody provider, what you should realistically do is you have user A who has address A, and they're kind of like bound together. And that way, if I like click the button really quick twice, I don't actually double spend the Bitcoin. Because if it's all like Fireblocks and then like a big pool of everybody's funds, there's chances for like race conditions or like logic vulnerabilities, like sending negative amounts of money and things like that. And it's kind of like lots of interesting attack scenarios. And the last one we kind of talked about a bit, it's like the crypto websites aren't even using crypto anymore. Like these, there's a few like Coinbase who do have like full custody of your crypto, but places like Binance, they use APIs. And it's like, at that point, it's a normal website, like it's like a video game where you have got like a gold balance and you have to like try to get it up somehow, right? And they've handled more than $500 billion in assets, right? So if you pop those guys, you're like, oh, I'm the king of the world, right? But here's kind of an example vulnerability for, you have this website, metaverse.sotheby's.com, and it's supposed to be like a static website where you like buy and sell NFTs, right? But what's really interesting is that they use like these weird JavaScript libraries, and the weird JavaScript libraries actually have like server-side functions. So one of the functions is like this reverse proxy where, you know, they want to make your loading your images faster. So what they do is they have this route _IPX, and when you pass in content to that route, it gets reverse proxied to a service owned by like Next.js or Vercel, where you can provide an image URL. And with that image URL, you can like whitelist a domain name. Like let's say, you know, oh, I upload my content on mycompany.s3.amazonabs.com, where I load it in from. But there was a host parsing issue at one of the libraries where you can basically just add in a backslash and then like at yourcompany.com, and then you can load an SVG file. And when you load an SVG file, it's just like universal XSS on all of the nuxt, you know, image libraries. And it's like really, really fascinating because it's like all of these things use these like libraries, and like they're all meant to be like static, but like realistically, like there's still so much functionality that's like you can mess with, right? And it creates like all these like interesting scenarios where, you know, the core part of like trying to hack these things is like compromising the integrity of the website, because it's the only place that users know to go to buy the item, and they trust it. So if you can deploy arbitrary content, it's a bad thing, right? And is there a chance I could grab like the time remaining? I'm really bad at gathering time, so if I'm short or long, I apologize. 10:30? Oh, 40? Yeah. I think until like 11:15, maybe. But yeah, awesome. So yeah, like here's another one, right? Next.js, right? Like Next.js is used like everywhere. And we see this all the time. The _next handler is basically like, you know, it signifies that you're going to be loading in like the Next.js like resources for the app. So they do like a lot of like caching JavaScript files, or like providing like this image URL where you can basically do the same thing, where it's a reverse proxy host. But what's really interesting is that it was vulnerable to open redirects via this like really funny thing, right? So when I reported this to Next.js, they're like, we'll give you like a t-shirt. But I was like, okay, but I'll try to report someone else too, you know, see if they care, right? And what we were able to do was like, since this was like everywhere, you could literally just append _next/image to like anything running Next.js. You're able to use it on like these very secure like login.company.com, and you're able to basically perform an account takeover via OAuth vulnerabilities. So they paid like a 4K bounty, which is really cool. Here's kind of another similar issue, right? You know, Circle.com. It's one of the biggest like stable coins ever. Like it's got like a huge market cap. I think it's USDC, which is like a huge market cap. But their www domain is hosted on this thing called Hubspot, right? And Hubspot has like a similar functionality where if you hit like the HS-SS route, it basically reverse proxies the content from their CDN, right? Because it's like the Hubspot static file upload, right? But we found this endpoint where you could send a post request to the API with an API key, and you could provide a parameter called template type, and you can also provide like path and source, right? So when you upload this content, it basically gets pushed to a CDN URL, which is meant to be used for like Hubspot customers, right? And when you copy that, you know, CDN URL, you can actually like take out the string it gives you and paste it into the HS-FS. And when you do that, you get basically like universal XSS on all of like Hubspot customers, which is like a huge number of customers, right? But what was really interesting too is like there's also this _HCMS/diagnostics endpoint, which was kind of cool. Because what the endpoint did was it reflected your entire HTTP request. This was really good for us because, you know, like let's say you're a super secure company, like let's say Liquid.com provides you know, like crypto stuff. What you can do is like, you know, Liquid.com would be like, you know, we're making our cookies HTTP only and secure. And then like you find this where it's like, oh, I can just send an XML HTTP request to the diagnostics endpoint, grab the cookies, and now I have all your secure cookies. And it affects, you know, all of the Hubspot customers. And we ended up getting like a $10,000 bounty from a centralized exchange, where basically they were hosting their cookies for star.theirdomain.com. So you know, they had their www landing page. Then they also had like buy.company.com. But you could just like hit www, grab their session token, steal it, log into their account, and it's another example of just like, you know, this stuff is, lots of similar issues, right? Here's another one for like Instapage, right? Instapage is used everywhere. It's like similar to Hubspot, it's like a landing page provider. But what you're able to do is just like, when you register a domain to Instapage, you're able to like publish content to it. So if you know, like if your domain is taken on Instapage, like let's say you have customer.com, and a customer registers customer.com, you're not able to register that, and it blocks you, and you can't publish content. But all you had to do is append like a couple null bytes, and you could just register, like re-register domains and publish content on it. So we were able to publish on like the core about that instapage.com, right? Yeah, so it's kind of cool to report that. So, and sorry for like we're trying to like, I'm speedrunning a couple of these issues because they're kind of similar, right? So here's another one. Do you guys know, anybody here use Gitbook or know Gitbook at all? Oh, gotcha. So Gitbook is like, they provide like documentation for APIs and basically links up to a GitHub repository. But the thing is, they have like a very similar thing where little squiggly line /files was a reverse proxy, but they check to make sure that your appspot.com host, your Google cloud provider, started with Gitbook dash, right? So we were able to register Gitbook dash x dash heck at appspot.com, and then we were able to load in our files. And then once you do that, we made this little fun POC for the CryptoKitties website, where we have the sushi swap v2 migration tutorial. So you post it in like another thing too is like, these domains are really trusted, right? So a lot of Discord servers, for instance, like if you have a crypto community, you tell them to go to your Discord server, but you're not allowed to post URLs like your website. But they're like, okay, we'll whitelist certain URLs for our website. So let's say you post this in the main chat, and like, oh, hey guys, the v2 migration. So now people are going here like, oh, I'll fill it out because I trust it, right? The trust is like so weird for crypto. So another one, this one was affected crypto.com. I think you've probably seen it in advertising everywhere. Sports, UFC, like everywhere. So what you can do with this one is like, there's a parameter for Landingl, which is another page like Instapage, where you can basically pass in this parameter called export hash. And with export hash, it basically says, it's like a preview for your website you built on Landingl. But when you provide that to any website, it lets you basically pass in like your hash and then like load another user's resources like cross-tenant, right? So if you pass this hash in for like any URL, it just basically posts that. So we're able to take over like advertising.crypto.com, so we can run our own ad campaign for crypto.com. So it is wild though, like the amount of money that you spend on advertising. When we saw crypto.com, we're like, we have to hack them because like they're everywhere, right? So we found this domain and we kind of did the cheese thing of just like hacking a third party, which was Landingl. But to kind of go back in time a little bit, when crypto was like introduced, you had your desktop wallet, right? And a lot of people would say like the desktop wallet's like insecure or whatever. But the alternative is all of this to access your crypto, right? Like if you want, like let's say even like, you've got Infura to run the RPC node, you've got OpenSea, which does like NFT sales. So every step along the way, you trust that that step isn't going to be modifying your transactions or anything like that. You've got like NPM with all like the forget the name of it, but dependency confusion, right? Like there's like lots of different attack vectors for all these things. So it's like, are we really getting more secure? Are we getting more like distributed into like these individual components, which are just more and more complicated and more vulnerable? Because to me, I see the left one and I see, oh, I feel safe and secure with my like desktop wallet. I can like send transactions or whatever. But the right one is like, oh my gosh, like how do I trust like all this stuff? Fun fact, Etherscan, one of the main websites people use for checking that you've actually sent your Ethereum, they offer like a max bounty of $20 for security vulnerabilities. And it's like, I'm not saying like, oh, you should, maybe they should pay more, but like realistically, like maybe Etherscan doesn't have like a good, like way to make revenue. But at the end of the day, the whole entire community relies on Etherscan, right? So there's a lot of these like building pains, or growing pains, I guess, of like, you now have to rely on this thing made by like these like 4 guys who don't really want to put time into it anymore, and it's very complicated, right? Here's kind of another vulnerability. we were hacking like stablecoins. We really wanted to hack stablecoins because, like, you know, what runs crypto like at its foundation? Like stablecoins do. Like, if you want to sell your Bitcoin for USD, you can sell it for like USDC or whatever. And we found this one stablecoin who was running another subdomain for like hosting your own shop, right? And what you could do with a shop is like you could upload files. So what you're able to do on this other domain is like upload a file and traverse directories, and you could actually overwrite the cron tab on the box, right? It was running as root. You could export like SSH keys and stuff via like some other like endpoints and stuff like that. But once you overwrite the cron tab, you can get just like a shell on the box, right? And we were in communication with our team, and we had permission to kind of like play around a little bit. But once we dumped the AWS keys, we found that the core server they used for, you know, if I want to buy a stablecoin, if I want to trade my like dollar into the stablecoin, you could pop that box. And what that would let you do is basically mint stablecoins unauthorized. So they'd get out a $50,000 bounty, which was like super huge for us. And it's kind of more the direction crypto's going, where it's just like these big bounties for like big impact, right? Like if you oversee, I think their market cap was like $150 million, but that doesn't really compare to the next bug, where compromising the entire .to TLD, right? So Tether has a market cap, I think, of, let me check. Tether's market cap is, give me a moment. Maybe someone will beat me. Tether market cap. I think $102 billion. Yeah, so Tether, you know, there's a lot of controversy with Tether because there's like some, did they mint their own Tether? Like, it's kind of like a Bernie Madoff type thing. They run out of the Bahamas or whatever, some island where they can get away from tax and like legislation, where they only have to do like attestations versus like full audits. But we were curious about like hacking Tether. So this website on the right is where you mint your Tether. So you log in, you create an account, you provide the KYC details, and you're able to like log in and buy Tether with your dollar, right? And we were like, okay, we're trying to hack it. We can't really find vulnerabilities. And we're having a rough go at it. But we're like, what is tether.to running on? Like, what is the TO TLD? And what the TO TLD is an island called Tonga, famous for their volcano explosion recently. You may have heard about. But with their volcano explosion and stuff, if we go back to the introduction of the TO TLD, there's these two guys, both named Eric. And .to was one of the very first TLDs made where like you can go to like a registrar basically, right? But their website is super old, right? They're still running their code, their Ruby on Rails code from like, you know, 2000 or something, right? And we're like, okay, if we can pop the .to TLD, we can take over Tether, because we can modify the DNS records for Tether. And then at that point, you can steal the keys used to like manage the website. And after you've migrated the DNS to your stuff, you can basically take the cookies and stuff, log in as an administrator or a user, and you're basically in that panel where you can mint Tether, right? So we demonstrated the vulnerability. We found the SQL injection where we're able to basically dump the passwords and credentials of everybody. It was in plain text. Yeah. So, and then once we had those, there's a guy named Palo, I'm not sure how I pronounce it, my apologies. But he basically, we reached out to him, we're like, hey, we can do this really bad thing on Tonic. And we'd sent a couple of emails to Tonic to try to get in touch with them, but like, they've been at a TLD for like 20 years. I think they're a little like hands off, you know? So we ended up reaching out to Palo. We're like, hey, you know, we can hack your TLD right now, like, or we can compromise the tether.to website. And he's like, oh God. And then he gets us in contact and writes like an angry email, like, we need to fix this. So they ended up paying, Tether ended up paying like a $52,000 bounty for this. The Tonic guys, yeah, really, really cool about it. We ended up doing like a pen test for them for Tonic over a couple weeks after that, but really, really interesting vulnerability and like very interesting to compromise the TLD. Did I get a time? I guess I can check really quick. 10:53? Okay, cool.
21 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. So, yeah, something interesting too about the .to TLD. If you're buying something off Amazon and you have an affiliate link, you know, where you get your little money, they use anzn.to, right? So if you ever see the Mr. Robot scene where like Darlene's like, oh, you know, I hacked the food app where I can steal people's affiliate codes, think about compromising anzn.to, overriding all of the Amazon traffic to your affiliate ID, and then you cash in for like an hour and become like a millionaire overnight. Clearly, you'd be caught, but you know, it'd be fun to be like Darlene for a little bit, right? Yeah, sure. Sorry, spoilers. More vulnerabilities, I guess. Like, there's this account takeover on this thing called Crypterium, which is like a centralized exchange. There's this post request. They have an internal API, and they prevented access via like a WAF rule, where it's like, you shouldn't be able to hit /internal, but you know, you throw a semicolon /, you bypass it, and then you can just log in with any phone number. So they paid like 3K bounty, which is cool. Another one, role, similar thing, but with this one, another API. So role is like another custodial thing where you log in with a username and password, they give you your wallet ID, and you can buy and sell like different cryptocurrencies, right? But they have this endpoint, get/v1 /users, like it was unauthenticated, basically just returned the user IDs of all the users. It wasn't like passwords or anything, but once you have the user ID, you can basically enroll users for 2FA, which is like, enrolling users for 2FA is like, you're doing them a favor, I guess. They gotta solve a thing to log in, you know, maybe it's more secure. But the HTTP request returned their authorization bearer, right? So you copy that bearer after you add 2FA to their account, and you're just logged into their account, right? So they paid like a 5K bounty. It's pretty cool. And that's kind of all. So yeah, this talk, I don't know if to kind of reiterate a little bit, like we've been doing kind of like crypto hacking for like freelance like 2 years before, and then we started doing it like full time through like a company for like the last year. But like the reoccurring theme we keep seeing like over and over again is just like there's a lack of, you know, the way in which like you're interacting with these websites is like still fundamentally broken, right? There's like, you know, like in the upper right corner, right? If you're a user, you're not going to download a copy of the chain. You're not going to get the entire Ethereum chain to interact with the website. Even though that'd be the best thing to do, assuming that from the supply chain you get the correct binary, you instead go to OpenSea.io and you see that this whatever tennis bag is on sale for 0.1 Ethereum, right? And you click it and you trust that OpenSea.io is selling you that tennis bag for that price, you're interacting with the right contract, right? And that's where we are with cryptocurrency stuff. The cryptocurrency attacks are increasing complexity, right? So kind of first bullet point. Like recently there's a big Twitter thread where someone was targeted by like this woman pretending to be like an owner of this big project where she basically says like, we want to collaborate on this project and like do all this stuff. And they had a relationship with the guy the guy was the owner of like I think it was a DAO, and he had like access to like hundreds of millions of dollars in funds. And this girl is like, oh, you know, we run this project, we want to collaborate. And he kind of gets baited in for like months. And when you think about it, you're like, okay, that makes sense, right? Like, what would you do for hundreds of millions of dollars that's irreversible, right? Like, the guises are getting more sophisticated, and like, you still have that second bullet point, like, and by the way, he ended up, he noticed it last second, so, yeah. A little too close, right? There's all this reliance on like browser extensions. Traditional web's complicated. I've seen like things like MetaMask for sidechains like Solana that like auto-authorize entire domains, right? So like, let's say you download like the browser extension that lets you like transact with websites. Basically, they have things where it's like, oh, do you trust Google.com? Okay, we'll make your experience easier. We'll auto-approve every transaction for you. Why? That is terrible. Like, I'm just being honest. Like, that is just like, I don't know. Subdomain takeover, the bugs from before, like now, an XSS is worth like $100 million if you get the right person, right? Attackers aren't slowing down, right? Like, you know, you have people who are like being introduced to this stuff like when they're like 12 years old. And you have all these like teenagers on the internet who would like, there's the recent like Twitter hack guy, right? The doubling Bitcoin guy. Like, I think if that guy started a little bit earlier or thought about it a little bit more, he would have thought of something more sophisticated to do. And then like, you know, everything just kind of collapses because there's like this incentive for free money, right? Like, yeah, the culture of like APN, right? Like, let's say you're like a big fan of the Bored Ape Yacht Club. You want to buy their NFTs, right? And they send a message in their Discord server. They're like, oh, we're actually doing another sale for the next 10 minutes. And you're like, oh my God, those things went up to like 100 Ethereum. And I only have like 400 bucks. So you spend your 400 bucks because the message said so. You buy the item, you hold it, you hope that you did the right thing. But it's a Discord server. They get hacked. Like, how do you make sure that the speed in which you're going about it is like, at the same time, like, correct, right? And yeah, kind of last thing is like, no one's downloading a copy of the chain anymore. Like, I know like maybe 3 people who download like the entire chain to verify their transactions, and they run like a node to make sure they're like all updated and stuff. But like realistically, you're depending on like RPCs like in Fura to make sure that your transactions are correct and stuff. But yeah, to kind of close off the talk, huge thanks to everybody. This is kind of, Brett asked me to make his text bigger because he's helped a lot with this. So big thanks to Brett Bierhaus, Nathaniel Wakelam, Mike Robert, Dallas Betty, Benjamin Lefevre, Benson Takeover, Oliver Begg. And there should be Justin Reinhardt in there. I'm not sure why it is, but he's right here. So yeah, it's incidental, I promise. But yeah, so over the last, we've been putting a lot of time into trying to find stuff. A lot of the cool stuff is behind NDA, sadly, or whatever, but what's another thing too is like these companies aren't really in with the times for like, security disclosure and responsible disclosure, because, I don't know, it is a bit like the Wild West, and I think a lot of teams, like crypto teams, their interactions with hackers are pretty bad, right? Like, someone joins their Discord server, threatens to hack them. So that's like, it reminds me of like video games, right? Like, with video games, I feel like the teams running video games don't really have good relationships with hackers, right? So like, we're kind of in the Wild West era, and I think it's gonna get better, but yeah, overall, I think, yeah, we've got like 15 minutes for questions, but yeah, thank you so much for sitting through this hour of bugs. But yeah. Yeah, super happy to answer anything. We definitely have 15 minutes. Any questions at all, you can bullet me. Oh yeah.
So you were saying like, it's clear that the companies are either not responsive or paying out through the middle.
Yep.
And there goes that little hacker side. Like, do you think it's mostly, it seems like it's mostly their lack of willingness to engage in security stuff is because they want to have the perception of cryptocurrency, what they're doing to be this full of proof thing, right? And not admit that. Like, are you seeing that change at all? Like, are the bounties getting bigger? People are paying attention to it, or is it still they're just playing this kind of facade?
I think like overall, like there's different players who have different approaches to it, but when we started like a year ago, it was absolutely bad, right? It was absolutely like, we're gonna pretend like web vulnerabilities don't exist, and we're gonna do like $10 million bounty if you can steal our money, which is kind of like, yeah, if you can steal our money, whatever. But for web vulnerabilities where it's a little more like, it impacts the users more than them, it's a little more weird. But I've definitely seen it. So for instance, there's a guy, his name is Alex Adala, I think is how you say it, but he's the CEO and founder of OpenSea, right? And he's like a Stanford grad, and I think he's been like kind of thinking about this a little bit too, because recently what they did is they hired a guy from Google to run their web bounty program. And they increased their bounties like overall to like $100,000 critical, right? Which for industry standards is like super good, right? So I think there are like certain companies that are getting it, and they're like, okay, we really should do this. But on the other side of it, with how crypto kind of operates, you've got like kind of fly-by-night stuff where like you've got a guy who's pumping out like 10 projects a month, and it's like, we've had situations where there's a company called Axie Infinity, right? And Axie Infinity now is like this billion-dollar game, right? But when we report vulnerabilities to them, they were tiny, like super small. We reported vulnerabilities where we could steal land, and that land is now worth like tens of millions of dollars. But at the time, they're like, we're a startup, like we don't have money, we're not gonna pay you, like thanks for the bug. But now it's like if you report, they're like, oh, now we're $1 billion, like we'll pay you. But yeah. Sorry, yeah. Oh yeah.
Did you say the crypto kind of ecosystem that built around it, did it kind of incentivize the lack of security to start?
I think in a way, yeah. Like in the way, like people always compare it to like the 90s, like the like internet boom. I wasn't alive for that. But in terms of build fast and break things, it's not very good for security, right? There's like a lot of these contractors. Like, if you're a guy who wants to make like a couple bucks or whatever, like you're like, I'm a contractor and I can build Web3 stuff. It's like, okay, we'll hire you because there's a lack of talent. And then you have this dude who's maybe not the most experienced, but he's the best salesperson, and he builds your app, and it definitely, I definitely feel that everything kind of works together to make it not the most secure. But, yeah.
So you mentioned that when someone's self-hosting, you'll take a look at and what's being used for that. How do
Oh yeah, so like super interesting, right? So hardware wallets, right? So the question is like kind of like, how do hardware wallets kind of play into like the greater security ecosystem for this stuff? I think like hardware wallets are really cool for like, you have this vault that you keep offline and you don't use it for anything. Like let's say like, realistically, like if you have your hardware wallet that's like a vault, you keep it all offline and you don't really interact with stuff, like it totally makes sense. Like you're not really putting it out to the world. You've got your key, you're hiding it. Like the vulnerabilities for those like that I've read about, I'm not really a hardware guy. I think Joe is the hardware guy. But I think those are interesting because like in the same way like you use MetaMask for like your normal transactions, if you do end up using your like hardware wallet for transactions, you face the exact same vulnerability, right? So there's like a good extension for my Adobe.
Don't do it.
For the security conference, yeah. Oh no, yeah, definitely. Yeah. But yeah, hardware wallets, right? Like, I think like the supply chain, it's a different like world of vulnerabilities, like supply chain attacks like Joe did, where he's basically like able to just root the key, take the funds out, and stuff like that. Like those attacks are really cool, but in terms of web vulnerabilities, like I think the only thing that changes like the way in which you interface with the stuff, right? If you're using a hardware wallet, like I knew a guy who was in Brazil, he had a hardware wallet, and he was going on local Bitcoins to like buy Bitcoin, right? And he brings his hardware wallet, it gets stolen, right? Like you're exposing your hardware wallet, and maybe the same way in which you like plug it to a web browser, it's like you're facing the same issues, right? But yeah, so sorry, I don't know if I answered that like you did, but yeah. Awesome. Oh yeah.
I have a very basic question. I want to invest in crypto.
Yep.
And now you got me freaked out. Right?
Yeah.
Or Coinbase, which sounds like a good avenue. So just want to get your perspective.
Yeah, 100%. So I think like if you're like a hardcore security person who's like really knows their stuff and like really can like set up their stuff properly, I think doing like a self-custody wallet like kind of makes sense. But like if you're like you're maybe not like super good at crypto or good security, I think using Coinbase is actually probably like the best bet, realistically, right? Because those guys, they both have to care about like their funds, and they also have to care about the integrity of their company, right? So like let's say like $10 million gets stolen from Coinbase, which is nothing to them. They'll probably pay it back to you, right? They'll probably be like, okay, your $10 was stolen, but we want to do the right thing and pay it back. So like, Coinbase also has a browser extension, and you have to face the same risks. Like, if you're going out, like, there's a good thing. I'll post the slides, but I'll include the bottom of it. But there's a good document which is like the best way to set up. Like, you've got your wallet which you use for, let's say you keep like 100 of your money on it, and you like buy stuff with it or do whatever, and then you have your other wallet which is like your hardware wallet, right? And you kind of just like don't really bind the two. You kind of take funds away via like your, plugging it in and like doing it safely, and then like you put it back and you forget about it. But realistically, with how fast everything's going, like your wallet will probably get popped in the sense of there will probably be one website which is like hacked or something like that, where if you don't read it correctly, like you may authorize like transferring for like one of your ERC20 tokens or something, and that like you're gonna get owned. So like assume that your hot wallet will get hacked, or assume that it will get like at the very least like fall victim stuff. But yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Not that you know about so many other names, are you interested in more?
Yeah, so I don't know. In terms of like investing in like crypto, right? Like I'm not really. A lot of the technology I think is really cool. Like DeFi is like, really interesting to me, but I'm not like the most like hardcore like this token's gonna change the world. I'm gonna invest in it. I like kind of play around with it a little bit. Like some of my buddies have projects. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'll put money into it or whatever. But I think security vulnerabilities aren't necessarily going to like. For some things, they can like absolutely collapse the whole ecosystem, where it's like someone stole the entire balance. But for the most part, I think things are going to break and kind of fall apart. And I think it may affect the price or whatever. But like realistically, just be kind of do they have a security team? If so, like they're trying to invest maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say, right? Things will probably break. So, but yeah, awesome. I think we are maybe like 5 more minutes. Yeah, again, thank you for kind of like sitting through the talk. If there are like any last questions at all, I'm happy to answer like whatever. Oh yeah, so sorry for my bad.
How many talks have you done?
Not too many. I've done like maybe 2 talks. I did one at ConCon last year and then one at DEF CON. But yeah. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah.
What's next after other web apps?
Yeah, I don't know. So I went to a conference called Ethereum in Denver, right? It's a big crypto conference. And this guy gave this talk, which was basically, it was supposed to be the solution to this problem of, or the problem of like, we're depending on Web 2, and we're Web 3, how do we fix it? But their solution was basically like, we're gonna make our own website, and that website is gonna link to all the other websites. But it's like, it's not a solution. I think, you know, like, if you really wanted to solve like kind of the base level problem of like, you're trusting all this stuff, you'd have to like redesign it from the ground up, right? And it has to be like all on chain, and even at that point, it's just like reducing the problems and reducing the risk, but there's still other issues, right? So I think the next thing is, I can't really say super well the next thing, but I think that trying to solve that, like trying to isolate, is a good step, right? Yeah, good question, thank you. 5 minutes. You know, honestly, we could probably end a little bit early if you guys want. If there's not any more questions, yeah, just like go get some coffee.